As a reminder, we are here to talk about addiction and recovery, cultural elements of working with Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, Latini populations, and it is being presented by Dr. Hernandez. On the next slide, we have a short little bit of information, but Dr. Hernandez, we'd love to hear it from you. And thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Jessica, for all of the support for the invite to collaborate and for all of the background work in tech and to the rest of the team as well. Carmen, muchas gracias por su traducción hoy y por su trabajo y labor para con nuestra gente. Whenever I go to training, I want to learn more about who's doing the training. So, in that light, I'll share a little bit about myself. On December of this year, it'll be 37. Well, next month, it'll be 37 years of experience working at the community level. I live in Massachusetts. I am from Puerto Rico. And I've worked in inpatient settings, outpatient settings, community-based, not-for-profit settings for almost 4 decades. In addition to providing training and technical assistance, I have worked in every single state except the state of Alaska on programs and initiatives that are funded by SAMHSA, HRSA, CDC at the federal level, and I perform as a consultant in those capacities. Being on the ground in all of the states except Alaska and all of the territories except Guam enables me to meet people, really good people doing really good work, such as yourself. And it enables me to bring that information with me back home and to share with others across the country. So I want to thank you a great deal for doing that. My style is participatory, and it's grounded in eliminating disparities and building equity. We're going to focus on that here today. And the participatory nature of it, there are 146 people and counting joined here today. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do is to put some stuff in the chat, some questions in the Q&A, and participate in that fashion. I want to also say that I have earned certification as a prevention specialist. I'm licensed and certified as an addictions counselor. And I brought you a picture so that you see when I walked in my graduation. And yes, I earned a PhD, but I also need for you to understand that I also earned a GED in prison. And it was more difficult to earn a GED in prison than a PhD out here. I am also a person in long-term recovery, which for me means that I haven't used a drug, including alcohol, for the last 37 years and 11 months. Next month, it'll be 38 years. My process of recovery enables me to be a productive member of my familia, first and foremost, of my community, and to be here present today. Thank you for all of the reactions there that I'm seeing coming through. The focus today will come from a couple of places. What does research says about this topic area, and what does lived and living experience say about this topic area? I come from a world where we value both. And so I want to encourage you to think about that as we move forward today. So without further ado, I'm going to take us forward, right? I'm sure that many of you, if not all, have been to the conferences and meetings where there's this mantra, addiction and mental health don't discriminate. And then a lot of people clap when people say this, right? I have done a lot of thinking and some research around what does this actually mean. I am not one of the people who claps for the following reasons. Yes, addiction and mental health don't discriminate, but individuals do. And I have been on the receiving and on the giving of discrimination throughout my career. Notice that I didn't just say on the receiving end, also on the giving end. If I'm going to be truthful and honest about myself, I have discriminated against other people, right? To say that is not a sign of weakness. The other piece is that systems discriminate, and systems are composed of policies, procedures, ways of doing things that either allow some people to get in while pushing other people out. So while I understand the mantra, addiction and mental health don't discriminate, systems and people do. And that is why we are in the position that we are in today as it relates to people who are seeking, needing recovery support services or access to the multiple pathways of recovery. I'm going to give you an example of what I mean by this. Imagine for a moment that in the place where you're working, um, there are some services that are available. Step back from that for a second and understand that most of our services have been designed for white heterosexual affluent males. Most of our services in health and in behavioral health very specifically have been designed for white heterosexual affluent males. Now, imagine that in our system of service, we have 2,000 residential beds for people with mental health and substance use disorders. A question is, can white heterosexual affluent males gain access to one of those 2,000 beds? The answer to that is yes. A separate question is, do we have enough beds for all white heterosexual affluent males? The answer to that is no, and we can keep multiple thoughts in our head, right? But let's pick on a different subpopulation. What if the person that is in front of us identifies as a female? Can she get in? The answer to that is yes, but not at the same rate as white heterosexual affluent males, right? Now let's add some caveats to that. Um, Female that has kids, can they get in? It's more difficult because our system wasn't designed for families. Female with kids doesn't speak English. In some places, that is impossible because our system wasn't designed for Spanish speakers. Female kids doesn't speak English, doesn't have health insurance. Can they get in? Next to impossible in some spaces and places. Add to that, doesn't have documentation to be in the country. So you see that the mantra of addiction and mental health doesn't discriminate. Our system does, and individuals do on a daily basis. We allow some people to get in, and we push some people out. Pick on other populations. If you're an older adult, our system wasn't designed for older adults. If you're a younger person, our system wasn't designed for young people. If you are a person with disabilities, physical, cognitive disabilities, can you get in? Wasn't designed for that population either. If you are deaf, hard of hearing, wasn't designed for that population either, right? If you identify as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, can you get in? It wasn't designed for that population either. And while you might have pockets of some spaces and places where there's access, there isn't full access. And let's remember, access and quality of care are two different things, right? As we go through the slides, you'll notice, and through the presentation, you'll notice that my slides are not conventional, right? I can do the academic slides. I teach at Brown and I do this stuff for a living, but I rather use a different set of slides for the conversation today. Now, on top of that, that our system wasn't designed for everybody, the reality is that we have been really good at designing silos and sustaining silos, right? Think about it. Someone walks through the door, they have a mental health issue, we need to send you somewhere else. Everybody doesn't need treatment, but everybody needs prevention, but we need to send you somewhere else because the prevention people are somewhere else, right? If you have issues with your kid, child welfare, that's something else. Health and human services, housing, shelter, clothing, that sort of thing, that's somewhere else. Healthcare, that's somewhere else. Substance use disorders, that's somewhere else. Now, if you work in a place where all this has been integrated, good for you. I'd like to hear more about it because I have yet to walk in a place in the US where all these things exist under one roof. Here's the problem with silos, that when we walked into this virtual room today, we brought our full selves into this. In other words, I brought my mental health, my physical health, my need for health and human services, substance use disorders, all of this stuff I brought into this room. I didn't come here fragmented. What happens with people when they come into our offices and spaces of service, they also come in with their full selves. What happens is that some people don't make it to the services that they need, and then we blame them. And we use this specific type of language. Oh, they fell through the cracks. No, people didn't fall through no cracks. We created gaping holes in our system that don't enable or allow for people to get access and quality of care. We should stop blaming people for the silos that we have developed and the silos that we continue to maintain on a daily basis. And notice that I'm talking about we. I'm not talking about external forces, because we too participate in the development and sustaining of silos. It is all of us working together that enables this to happen. Now, I won't let policymakers, funders off the hook. Funders will say you must collaborate, but you must compete. Funders sustain silos because they'll say, I'll fund you for this, but you can't do that. Oh, but at the same time, you must collaborate. And now, but you must compete against each other. And so this system is not working for folks on the ground. I wish it ended there. And by the way, if you've noticed, I am setting the groundwork to talk then about cultural elements, but I don't think that we can talk about solutions without truly understanding what's happening to people on the ground, to our people on a daily basis, right? The other thing that we have done in behavioral health and mental health and substance use disorder services, very effectively, we have developed, implemented, and sustained punitive approaches. What do I mean by this, right? Funding. We have a lot of funding coming into our field right now, but we don't have the funding, all of the funding that we need. Most of the funding that comes into our field goes towards treatment. And I believe in treatment. I am an advocate for treatment. I am a proponent of treatment and a beneficiary of treatment. But don't get me wrong, because I understand the research. The research says of all people with a substance use issue, only 25% of them need treatment. So why do we spend 80% of our money on treatment? And why don't we fully fund the entire continuum of care? Questions, right? When someone experiences a recurrence, a return to use, or signs and symptoms of their disease, what have we done historically and what we continue to do to this day? We kick people out of care. Let me pause there for a moment. Now, think about that. Our agencies took money and said, we know how to serve this population with these issues. We have staff that are competent, that are qualified, and they know how to do the work. Yet, as soon as people start exhibiting signs and symptoms of the disease that brought them to that space to begin with, why do we kick them out of care? Imagine if you have diabetes for a moment and your blood sugar level is out of control. You either took something into your system that you shouldn't have, or you didn't eat at all, and now your blood sugar level is out of control. You call your doctor's office. You know what they say? You know what they don't say is call back in 2 hours, call back in 2 hours, call back in 2 hours. In the behavioral health system, that is common practice. You know what they say? Let's make an appointment, come in, they draw blood. They want to see if it's diet, exercise, medication, or combination of the three. They don't say we're taking your insulin because you've been irresponsible and you're exhibiting signs and symptoms of your disease. If we did that to people related to any other health condition, those organizations would be sued. There would be malpractice on the table, and the plaintiffs would win. But in behavioral health, this happens all the time. I wish it ended there, but this isn't the only punitive approach that we have. We have criminalized mental health and substance use disorders. I'm going to do a deeper dive into this. In this country, we have led with a criminal injustice approach to a public health matter. And I wish it ended there, but it doesn't. We have also criminalized color, because disproportionately the people behind the wall doing time are disproportionately Native American, Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx folk. This is the system that we have built. This is the system with which we operate within, which is very concerning, right? And again, I don't go to solutions right away. People want to go to solutions right away, but we need to establish what the inequities are, what are the discriminatory practices are, what are the punitive approaches to doing what we do. All of those punitive approaches, all of those and other historical factors have led us to develop and sustain disparities, right? And so, what are disparities as we know them? So, disparities are a racial, ethnic, or behavioral health outcome that is seen to a greater or lesser extent between populations. These are particularly linked with social, economic, and or environmental disadvantage. And I'm going to encourage you to visit Healthy People 2030, which is a webpage that you'll see a lot more research and information about disparities, right? Now, there are individual factors that are associated with disparities. They include race, ethnicity, religion, socioeconomic status, ability, gender, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, and always we include in this conversation other characteristics that are historically linked to discrimination or exclusion. So these are the individual factors. You know what we do as a system? We collect a lot of information at the individual level. We collect a lot of information at the individual level. What we do with it is another story, is another question for another day. Here's where we don't focus a great deal on the structural and social factors that are associated with disparities. Notice that I underline structural. Social factors that are a little bit wishy-washy. Structures refer to built environments that were built with policies, with decision makers, with people who sustain them, and everything else. So if we view structures that are built, we can break them down and build them differently, right? These include how we have institutionalized racism, health insurance and access, quality of care. Those two things are different. Underemployment and unemployment, education access and quality thereof, neighborhood conditions and housing within those neighborhoods, environmental hazards that exist within certain neighborhoods and not others, access and quality of the continuum of care. And here we're talking about prevention, intervention, the multiple pathways of recovery and recovery support. These are built structures. They impact people's ability to get better or not. Structural. These are connected to disparities, right? So I'm going to ask you right quick, if you will, in the chat, in the chat, give us an example of a disparity that you're familiar with. Give us, I'll take 2 or 3 of these in the chat. You can put as many as you want, but we don't have time. We won't have time to go through all of them. Housing, right? We know that housing is a hot mess all over the country, right? Um, Economic, we have socioeconomic issues, right? The poor, the working poor, the extremely poor, all of those things. We see food deserts. We see disparities in education, in transportation. Um, Language in and of itself is not a disparity, but people who speak other languages experience disparities because our systems were not built to engage with them. Thank you for doing all of that in the chat rather quickly, right? So there's a number of disparities that we're familiar with that exist within our field. And if we're paying close attention to them, we will see them, right? Again, disabilities are not a disparity. People with disabilities experience disparities because our systems were not designed to reach them. There's a lot of disparities around food insecurity, food deserts. People have mentioned those. I'm going to move us on, but thank you for participating in the chat that way, right? So when we talk about access to mental health and substance disorder care, because this session today is about Hispanic, Latino, Latinx population, I want to share with you some disparities in that community, right? And in 2020, the Census Bureau reported that 49%, almost 50% of the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx population had private insurance coverage as compared to 73% for non-Hispanic whites. You see the disparity there? The number of people who are uninsured is almost half within our community when that number is lower for the white general community in the US. More than half of Hispanics or Latino Latinx adults age 18 or older with and youth age 12 to 17 had mental health challenges, did not receive treatment within the past year. Fewer Hispanic, Latino, Latinx adults sought help for substance use, and more than 90% did not receive treatment. So this is 90% of people not receiving care at all. And this highlights disparities in access to care very specifically, right? Other disparities highlight quality of care, which is this one here. Of the 2.4 million Hispanics, Latino, Latinx people who experienced both mental health and substance disorder in the past year, only 25% received any mental health treatment, and only 10.8% received both mental health and substance use treatment. So you see that our field has our folks have experienced disparities in the field because of issues of access, um, quality of care, and other areas. Now, I must say this, disparities have been developing on this continent for hundreds and hundreds of years. In this country, since the inception of the country, the way that this country treated Native people, African people who were kidnapped and brought against their will to the U.S., and in the treatment of other folks who developed on this continent as a result of the intersections of the populations that were here and folks who arrived. So within access to mental health care and substance use, we see a lot of disparity. So it's important to keep that in mind. So you're looking at this image and you're saying, okay, how does he go from all of that to a big elephant in the room? Not just an elephant's ass, right? Forgive the language there, but the elephant in the room. And I refuse to go anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world, and talk about substance use and mental health within the context of the US if we don't mention the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room, good people, is mass incarceration. In 1970 in the US, there were 200,000 people incarcerated. We fast forward to today, that's 2.3 million people who are incarcerated in the US. Think about that, 2.3 million people. We have the largest prison population per capita in the world. USA number one, right? If we add 5 to 6 million people who are on probation, parole, house arrest, this is almost 10 million people. Think about that for a moment. Almost 10 million people who are touched by this criminal injustice system. Listen to the language that I use because I use it purposefully and carefully. Not a criminal justice system, it's a criminal injustice system. And if you don't believe that, the data that I'm going to share in the following few slides are going to help us to understand what that looks like, right? Now, every year from county jails, we release approximately 7 million people. Every year from state and federal prisons, we release approximately 600,000 people. Combine those two numbers, that's almost 8 million. So we have 10 million here plus 8 million that we release every year. That 8 million people that we release every year, they're going to be 75% of them are going to be rearrested within a year. So 75% recidivism, right? They're going to end up back incarcerated. And in some communities, those are higher numbers. When I'm thinking about Black, Latino, Hispanic, Latinx communities, Native communities, the recidivism rates are higher than in the general white population. 100% of those people who are being released are going to struggle with a whole bunch of things, including trauma, re-traumatization. Many of them are going to struggle with housing, with employment. They're going to struggle with reentry into a society that stigmatizes them in very significant ways. Understand that that is what's happening. Over 97% of the people that we incarcerate in the country are poor because the system is of incarcerating poor people. We don't incarcerate affluent people at the same rate as poor people, and they definitely don't serve the same amount of time or serve their time in the same types of prisons that we do. And I count myself among them, so we can understand that. Most of these people have co-occurring issues. 65% or higher have a diagnosable mental health condition. 80% or higher, depending on where you live in the country, have a diagnosable substance use issue. And over 85% have co-occurring health conditions, right? So think about all of the complexity that I just shared with you in terms of what we've done, right? For folks and what they look like and who they are and where they come from. Now, there have been deliberate policies that have been developed that drive mass incarceration. I'm going to invite you back into the chat. Give us a policy that you believe has driven mass incarceration in the country. Give us a policy. Start us off, anybody. That you believe drives mass incarceration. 3 strikes and you're out. Stop and frisk. 3 strikes, stop and frisk. There's plenty of those. 14th Amendment, privatization of prisons, every drug policy, no public camping, 3 strikes. You're coming in fast and furious. Thank you for that. Criminalizing sleeping outside, the war on drugs. Yep, socioeconomic issue, profiting, all of those things. Thank you for juvenile system, loitering, the war on drugs, mental health, war on drugs, war on poverty. It's amazing, right? The U.S. is always declaring war on everything, and it's just talk, right? And why are we using military language to deal with health and human services, right? Low academic success, biases, see all of those in the chat. All right, so thank you for doing those. I'm going to truancy, gun laws, all of the stuff that you're putting in the chat. I'm going to move away from the chat myself because I need to share with you the slides, right? So everything that you have and then some. Deinstitutionalization, 1960. Then President Kennedy said in a bill that he signed, 2 things. We're going to close down all mental state institutions, they were called at the time, right? His mother, Eunice Kennedy, influenced the law by way of saying we need to reintegrate people back into communities. The first part of the law happened. We closed all state mental institutions, but the second part of the law was not implemented. Many of those people ended up in prisons and jails across the country. So the institutionalization, this one you mentioned, the war on drugs, 1970, Tricky Dick, Richard Nixon. We're going to go after people who possess drugs, who use drugs, who sell drugs, and we're going to intervene in other countries who produce drugs, right? And so it's not really a war on drugs, it's really a war on people, right? It's been documented in the research like that. The criminalization of behaviors. Some of you talked about criminalizing encampments. This U.S. Supreme Court in the summer of 2024, in their infinite wisdom, said that states and cities can criminalize people who live in encampments, in tents, sleeping outside. So effectively, you know what's happening? We are criminalizing poverty. We're criminalizing people who experience homelessness. But the U.S. has a long history of this, right? This stems from a group of laws in New York State called the Rockefeller laws. Stop and frisk is a part of this, right? Going after petty crime hard in inner city. And all of that is code words. Inner city, the majority of people who live in the inner city are people of color, right? So that's what we're talking about here by way of criminalizing behaviors. We are now trying to criminalize panhandling, right? Imagine what that does to people who are unhoused, to people who are in need of humanization, of being treated with dignity and respect, who are being treated in ways that are inhumane, to say the least, right? Powder versus crack cocaine. Now we're talking about the largest crime bill in U.S. history, 1994. Then Bill Clinton said in that bill, we're going to go after people, and people who have possessed crack cocaine, we're going to give them a lot more time than people who have powder cocaine. So this benefits who? People who have money, right? Because the people primarily who got arrested for small amounts of crack cocaine did 20, 15, 30. Some people are still locked up because of these crimes. We're black and brown people from inner city again, right? The disparity in sentencing was 100 to 1, 100 years to 1. Obama brought it down to 18 years to 1, but it's still a disparity, right? Mandatory minimums, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years behind the wall without the right to probation, parole, or early release. And so when you're released abruptly. That's part of that 8 million that are released every year, right? And with very little to no reentry services. Voting rights. I didn't see that anyone mentioned this. in the chat, but in upwards of 20 states, if I move there with the criminal offender that I have, with the criminal offender record that I have that includes felonies, I would not be able to vote for things that I did and paid my debt to society almost 4 decades ago. And even if it was yesterday and I paid my debt to society, why should I be stigmatized and treated in a discriminatory way as it relates to voting rights in the country? Now, you hear what people say, oh, if you don't vote, you can't complain. You know what I say to people who say that? Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Some people can't vote not because they don't want to, but because they're not allowed to, because the people in power fear how they would vote. School zones. In the city where I live, only 1,000 feet is not a school zone. Okay? School zones attach 2 years of mandatory time to whatever the sentence is. And by the way, school zones are schools, daycare centers, and parks, and the law operates 24 hours a day, even when those spaces and places are closed. Now, school zones were designed to impact inner city. Remember what I said about inner city. Majority of people in inner city are people of color. This is a policy that was directed at people of color because school zones look very different in rural areas and in suburbs. They just do. And the people who live in the suburbs look somewhat different from the people who live in inner city. 3 strikes and you're out. Many of you mentioned this. There's a guy in Texas right now doing life in prison. His third strike, he stole 2 slices of pizza. I don't know about you, but being hungry should not be the reason why you do life in prison. And 2 slices of pizza, come on. My friend is doing life in prison in Massachusetts for stealing a car. Again, I did some things when I was actively using drugs I need to go to jail for. But really, do we need to send people to prison for the rest of their lives for stealing a car, for pizza, for being hungry, for being poor? Do we really need to do that? There's thousands and thousands of cases across the country that can be cited here as it relates to that. The massive prison construction industry, right? So think about the materials, think about who builds, who gets the contracts. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars that we have spent thus far, right? And that we'll spend into the future by way of maintaining those prisons and jails. And guess where the majority of prisons and jails are within the US? They are within white, affluent neighborhoods. The majority of people who work within them are white. And those jobs pay really well, benefits, retirement, health insurance, all of that. And the majority of the people within jails who work within jails vote, and they're not going to vote against their own interest. This you put into the chat. The privatization of prisons and jails and many of the services within prisons and jails, right? If you're sitting in this room, 164 people to count, I hope that each and every one of you have a 401k, a 401k or 403b retirement account. And if you do, you probably have money in private prisons and jails because they're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Imagine that, right? And on top of that, what we have done is we have developed a system of criminal offender records that follow people around for the rest of their lives, making things that more difficult for people to get their kids back if they were taken from the system. Jobs, housing, you name it, it just makes it more difficult, right? And some of you are like surprised at that last statement in terms of traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Yes, that is exactly what we have done. It costs a poor family on average $300 to $500 a month to receive calls from a loved one who's behind the wall. Someone is profiting from those calls, video calls, and emails, because we're charging people for that. Now imagine that. It's more expensive to call people from a prison to your home than for any one of us to call Africa, Asia, Europe, because I have an app on my phone that allows me to call anybody for free. Commissaries, clothing, food, all of those things have been privatized. Yeah, I am angry too, because I have been on the receiving end of this, and I have family members, people that I love dearly, people that I have never met who experience this type of stuff, right? And everything in there is very expensive. I'm going to give you another data point here for a moment, right? So-called plea bargains, right? This is Pew data. Pew data. 97% of all cases at the federal level are pled out. 94% of all cases at the state level are pled out. This is what this looks like in practice, right? Plea bargains. And listen to how we call them, plea bargains. So if 5 of us were sitting in a bullpen waiting to be sentenced and waiting to see our lawyer, why are we sitting in the bullpen? Because we're poor, and this system incarcerates poor people. And so we're sitting there because we can't afford bail. They would come to the back and they would say, Jessica, this is your third strike. The DA is out there. He or she is pissed off and they want 25 years. Are you willing to take 20? Casey, they want 20 years. Are you willing to take 15? Haley, they want 15. Are you willing to take 10? Carmen, they want 10. Are you willing to take 5? Hanel, they want 5. Are you willing to take 2? The majority of us are going to take that so-called plea bargain. You know why? Because we are smart people. We know that the DA, the district attorney, is an elected official. They are more concerned with being viewed as soft on crime and re-election, and they're going to smoke us if we take it to trial. That's what happened to my friend in Massachusetts who wouldn't take 15 years for a stolen car. So they hit them. They found him guilty. They hit him with habitual criminal, and there he sits, life in prison for a stolen car. Now, my question to you is, do you think that this system is broken? Raise your virtual hand, put a thumbs up if you think that this system is broken. Put it in your reactions if you think that this system is broken. Right? A lot of fingers going up. Folks in the chat saying this is outrageous. I see a lot of thumbs going up. I see a lot of thumbs going up. Well, let me respectfully disagree with all of you who agree that this system is broken. The system is not broken, good people. These are deliberate policies. This system works exactly the way it was designed to work. These are not coincidences. If you think that this system is broken, if we think that the system is broken, then we tinker around the edges. If we understand that this system is a system of profits, living off the misery of people who end up within the system, then it's a different perspective in terms of what we have to do. Think about the number of people who are employed by this system within prisons, within jails, within courts, lawyers, judges, district attorneys, construction companies. Think about the hundreds of billions of dollars every year that keeps this system going, functioning the way that it's supposed to, and how this performs on the US stock exchange. No, it's not broken. It is not broken. Let me share with you some additional data so that we solidly hit the ground with this piece, right? Now, the majority of people who are incarcerated in the US, and some of you put it in the chat, right? It's not broken for white and wealthy people, white people who are wealthy, because this system incarcerates poor white people as well, right? I want to remind us of that. This graph here is a little bit busy, but I just want to cover it quickly. The majority of people who are incarcerated are not females, but it incarcerates females, and we have to pay attention to everyone who's incarcerated, right? About 200,000. The majority are in local jails, right? 101,000. Then you see 99,000 in state prisons and the distribution in federal prisons, immigration detention centers, which, by the way, are prisons and jails. Whether we want to call them that or not, they are. And then youth detention centers, you see them there at about 6,000. I want to bring you to the first outer circle in local jails. Not convicted, 61,000. Convicted, 40,000. What do you think those women are guilty of? I'll give it to you right away. They're guilty of being poor. They can't afford bail. And you say, you're probably saying, oh, you're innocent until proven guilty. You know what I say to people who say that? Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, this is the greatest legal system in the world. Really? For who? For who? Some people go to jail and some people will never go to jail. For committing more significant crimes, they will never go to jail. Right? So when we look on the outer circles, property, drug, public order, property, drug, public order, property, drug, public order. Some of you are saying, yeah, but you skipped over violent crime. Let me say this. Not everybody who's charged with a violent crime committed violence. If you're caught with a gun, a knife, those are violent crimes, considered violent crimes, right? And let us never forget that many of the females who are in prison charged with violent crimes were defending themselves against violence perpetuated on them by males in society. We must take that into account. You know what this has written all over it? Trauma, disparities, re-traumatization, poverty, and the need for us to truly lead with a public health approach to this criminal injustice piece that we're talking about. Let me give you some data here about males very quickly. This is data from 2020. It holds true. Some say it's even a little bit higher. So when we think about the number of young males between the ages of 25 and 29 who are incarcerated per 100,000, per 100,000. For young white males, that's 1,437. It jumps up to 3,892 for Hispanic, Latino, Latinx males, right? And then look at what it does for Black and African American young males. Almost 9,000 at 8,932. I don't know about you, but this is the perfect picture of disparities and the system running amok, right? In terms of what it does. Some people have said, oh, this is because young Black and brown males are more prone to crime and violence than their white counterparts. That is a racist statement. Nothing could be further from the truth. And the research doesn't support any of that statement, right? The reality is that this system is designed to produce these results, and it does it really well. That's why I told you it's not a broken system. And if you think that number for young white males is low, 1,437, think about these. This is poor white males, and they deserve humanization as well. The difference between whites and Black and brown people when they go to jail, or one of the differences, aside from sentencing and all of that other stuff, but in terms of the experience, is the experience with race and racism. Whites don't experience that, but we do. Behind that wall, behind those systems, behind every single piece of healthcare that is offered, we get to experience that, right? This is not just Hanel talking because I've experienced it. This is what the research says. This is what the data say, right? How many of you think that we have an opioid crisis? Thumbs up or thumbs down or whatever your response is here. How many of you think that we have an opioid crisis? As you're thinking about that question and thumbs are going up and that sort of thing, here's a question. After decades and decades and decades and decades of racialized and poor people dying, why declare a crisis in recent history? Why declare a crisis in recent history? Right? This is a pivotal question that we need to understand. The why, right? I'm hoping that someone is going to respond to this question in the chat, right? Whites are dying. So yes, young white affluent kids from suburbs began to die at alarming rates. And all of a sudden, there's a public health crisis that's declared as it relates to opioids in November of 2017. Now, white, young, affluent kids and adults should not be dying. They deserve prevention, intervention, the multiple pathways of recovery and recovery supports. And so does everybody else. So does everybody else. See, that is the equity question here, right? So, yeah, Laura, in the chat, they didn't care when it was so-called crack epidemic, right? White doctors are addicted. They overprescribe opioids to certain populations, but not others, all of that. Now, I asked you to fingers up, thumbs up, if you agree that we have an opioid crisis. If you put your fingers up by now, you should know that if I ask you a question, I'm probably going to disagree with you. So I'm disagreeing again, and here's why. Respectfully, our crisis is way more complicated than opioids, you see. We have a crisis in substance use disorders, plural, not singular. More people die of alcohol-related disease last year than all the other drugs combined, to the tune of over 150,000 people. An additional 450,000 people died of tobacco use. And yes, people died of opioid use and cocaine use and methamphetamine use. It's way more complicated than just one substance. Be careful when they tell us what to think and how to think. We have a crisis in healthcare. Millions of people without access to healthcare. We have a crisis in over-criminalizing people. We have a crisis in education. You said that in the chat around disparities. We have a crisis in mental health. We have a crisis in child health welfare, where we even remove kids from Black and brown families at a larger clip than their white counterparts for the same types of issues. We have a crisis in housing, as you mentioned, in gambling, silent disease. A lot of people are struggling with gambling. And now we have online sports betting. further complicating the issues for our folks. We have a crisis in the workforce and we have a crisis in employment. So that is why I disagree with folks who think that we have an opioid crisis. Because when we come up with a myopic view of what the problems are, we always come up with myopic solutions. And there is history behind this. Right now, we have a 10% drop in 2023 of opioid overdose deaths in the country. Is that good? Yes. But you see me clapping? Don't clap for that. Because the reality is that those rates for Black, for Native, for Hispanic, Latino, Latinx people rose dramatically in 2023. Right? So it went down for the general population, i.e., the white population, because you're taking a lot of resources and putting into those communities. But our people continue to get prisons and jails and punitive approaches. And so we need to be careful not to collude with the forces that would have us collude with them. I'm moving quickly through some stuff, but I thank you for following in the chat and for everything that you're putting in the chat regarding this issue, right? Just another example of being in control of what people see and hear. Thank you for that, Caitlin, right? There's many, many, many different examples of these things. Now, in order for us to do this work, and I'm shifting gears here, right, from systems and what's happening with disparities and all of that, the structural determinants of health, and what does that look like, and their impacts on the people that we serve, that we want to serve, that we should be serving in equitable ways. I'm going to focus on who we are as individuals, right? Have you heard the people who say I'm non-biased? I used to say this a great deal. I don't say it anymore. Have you heard the people who say I'm non-judgmental? I used to say this a great deal. I don't say it anymore. Have you heard the people who say, I treat people the way that I want to be treated? It's called the golden rule. Sounds good, right? I used to say that a great deal. I don't say it anymore. Then my personal favorite is when people say, I treat everybody the same. I treat everybody the same. It's usually peppered with, I don't see color. I don't see color. I don't see color. What is it that you don't see? I don't see color. Why are you mentioning that you don't see color? Because you clearly see it. You're mentioning it over and over and over and over again, right? All of this is a huge crock of shit. That's my academic term for the day. Crock of shit is what it is, right? Why? Human beings are extremely biased. We're not born biased, but we learn bias all the time. As soon as we're out of the womb, we learn bias in family, in places of worship, in education settings. You're learning bias as we speak, right here, right now, through media, through social media, through campaigns that tell us what to think, how to think, and how to do it. And it's all laced with a lot of bias. Not all biases are bad. I don't drink soda, I drink water. I do certain things that help protect myself, and those are biases that are grounded in things that help. Be judgmental? Of course we are. Our human beings are. If you're sitting in this room and you're saying, I'm not judgmental, Hanel, you are. As soon as you opened your mouth, you started judging people and systems and everything else. And so if you said that to yourself, welcome to the crowd, you're biased. If you agree with me, you're biased and judgmental. And if you disagree with me, you're biased and judgmental. Right? Now, I can't see everybody who's in this room, but I doubt that everybody in this room is a 60-year-old Puerto Rican male in recovery with a history of incarceration. So I have no business treating you the way that I want to be treated. Those are my characteristics. And if this room was filled with 166 Puerto Rican males with the characteristics that I have, we're not all the same, which brings me to the latter point, right? Jessica is different from Casey, is different from Haley, is different from Carmen, is different from me. We're all different. We have similarities. So what should the bottom line be? I should treat people with dignity and respect. I should tailor my interventions to who you are, your cultural elements, what you present with, those sorts of things, as opposed to going around saying, I treat everybody the same. If you're treating everybody the same, you are making a whole bunch of mistakes. And I used to say that and do that myself, right? So this is a look inward to who we are, what we bring to this endeavor. If we want to get better, we have to look inward. If we want to get better by pointing fingers outward only, it's not going to get better. Not for the people that we serve, and not for ourselves, and not for our families, right? So when we think about La Familia Latina in recovery, so the Latino family in recovery, there's some things that we need to think about by way of these biases and judgments and everything else that we're talking about here. Before I share that with you, I just want to make sure I come to to the chat and just read some things quickly. Can bias ever be eliminated in humans? I don't think so. But I think that we can recognize it. I think that when we recognize it, then we can do something about it. But if we go around saying I'm not biased, then I do nothing, and then my biases come out anyway, right? Would we even be human anymore if bias was removed? I don't know about being human, but I do know this: we can't eliminate it, but we can reduce it. We can reduce it by working on self and working on systems. We can reduce discrimination and bias. Um, and whoever says that they've eliminated it completely from their lives, I'd like to have a conversation about that, right? But it has been present for a very long time. And what do we do to minimize it, to mitigate the harm, to deal with those sorts of things, right? Within the La Familia Latina, here's some things to think about, right? Some people don't view substance use disorders or mental health issues as a disease. They believe it's a moral failing. There's a typo there; it should have said they believe. Um, the distrust is to be expected by family members. So when you're working with people, just make sure that they understand, particularly people seeking or in recovery, they want people to accept them right away. So people are going to distrust you. My family distrusted me for many, many years. Why? Because of the carnage that I left behind when I was actively using substances, right? We want people to accept us right away. We need to work with families and with the people exhibiting the substance use disorder. Overly harsh communication about past behaviors and anguish, right? So, there's point out, but you did this, but you did that, but you did this, you did that. And it's very judgmental, it's very pointing fingers, and it doesn't necessarily lend itself for a process of healing. There's other ways that we can acknowledge, take responsibility and accountability for damages done in the past that help us move forward. Families who do this, individuals who do this, are not necessarily intending on doing harm to the individual. They just don't have the tools or the understanding to work through these things. That's where we come in as providers. It may not be possible to engage the family or the most significant members of the family in treatment or in any recovery pathway if the family is not ready. So it means that we need to work on readiness so that they can engage, and we need to work with systems theory, right? Family systems theory, because the Latino community is built around the family. We're going to come to that in a moment or two. Quite often, family members with substance use disorders and mental health challenges will continue to reside within the household. So I remember when I stopped using, when I went to treatment, when I was coming back into my family, there were still family members there who used, and still family members who had mental health conditions. And some of the people in treatment say, "Oh, you can't be around those people." I say, "Can't be around family? You're telling me that I need to not have family? That is not going to happen." What we need to teach people is skills, abilities, strategies for dealing with people within their families who are still using, as opposed to telling people, "Oh, you need to not deal with them at all." For some people, they don't have any other choice. They don't have another place to live. That is not an option for people, right? So when we think about biases and judgments, they impact folk in these ways, right? In the time that we have left, which is about an hour, um, I'm gonna shift the focus, right, to strength-based and culturally grounded approaches that center equity and justice, right? Those are the things that we're gonna shift to now. Let me do one more check of the chat here. Um, Michelle says something about when someone says that they don't see color, then they are choosing to not see me at all, right? Or all of me. I agree, right? Because when I step into whatever room, I step in my full self. That's what I was talking about earlier with silos, right? It diminishes the reality in which people live in on a daily basis. I am from Puerto Rico. When I go to Puerto Rico, I don't have to think about being Puerto Rican because I am. But when I'm in the US, every single day I'm reminded that I'm Puerto Rican. When I get out of the house, when I drive, when I go shopping, when I go anywhere, my characteristics are with me all of the time. And they follow me around in many different ways, right? And for us not to acknowledge those things, for us not to acknowledge or deny that those things are there, is not to validate people's existence, right? The same thing as it relates to gender and gender identity. If I don't recognize that you, how you identify, male, female, non-binary, right, transgender, whatever the identification is, if I don't validate that, then people are going to say, but wait a minute, you don't see me, you don't understand me, right? In society. And this for me is central to how we approach dealing with things with strengths, right? So thank you for putting those things in the chat that help us to think about these things moving forward. I'm going to shift to covering the cultural elements that are alive and well within Hispanic, Latino, Latinx populations, right? So we're talking about familismo, comes from the word familia or family. We're talking about respeto, which is respect. Personalismo, personal relationships. Right? Confianza, trust. Spirituality or espiritualidad. Those are the um, cultural elements that I want to give you. Before we go into them, I want to encourage you to think about this. Do not paint with a broad brush, right? These can apply to many Hispanic, Latino, Latinx folk, but they don't necessarily apply to all. So be careful. There are generational issues here, right? There are education issues here. There are similarities and differences by way of doing things. There's issues related to assimilation and how some people practice some things and others they do not. So think about that. Now, from the beginning, and it hasn't been in the chat, from the beginning, I've been using certain terms, and I want to address certain terms before I move forward. I've been using the term Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx, right? All of those terms. And you notice that I try to use all of them, not one. I don't identify with all of them, but as a provider, as an educator, I need to be able to articulate all of them because some people identify with the term Hispanic. I'm not that, but they do. And it's none of my business in terms of how they identify. It is my business to validate people, right? Some people identify with Latino, male, gendered, right? Some people identify with Latina, some people with Latinx, and the most recent one is Latina. And I'm going to encourage you to think about what that means for you and how do you use this terminology wherever you go. And some people say, oh no, we should just be talking about Latin because it means this, this, and this, and this, and this. Then if you decide to lead with that, you have all the right to lead with any one of these, but just know that you'll alienate some people from within the community because not everybody identifies in the way that we want them to. And this is not about me. This is about the people who are in front of me, right? So if someone says, I'm none of that, I'm Puerto Rican, I go like, yep, that's who you are. I'm Chicana, I'm Chicano, yep, that's who you are. I am Mexican American, that's who you are. I'm Cuban, I am Dominican, I am from Argentina, I am from Brazil, soy brasilero. Whatever they say is what they are, as opposed to me imposing a box and a category on people because it is problematic. I just want to take you back to a point in time where you were put in a box that you didn't agree with. How did that feel for you? If that felt uncomfortable, bad, and you fought back or you walked away because you weren't being validated, that's how it feels with these terms, right? So I use them all because I come in contact with people who identify in many different ways. Um, I know the term Hispanic was developed by the US Census. I'm not that, but other people do, and people from within my own family. So, I pause here because this usually comes up, and it's actually in the literature. If you Google uh, the name game, there's a series of articles that have been published on this very issue here, right? Um, so let me move forward now with the cultural elements that I said I would, right? So beginning with what? with familia or familismo here, family, right? This is a cultural value that involves individual strong identification with and attachment to their nuclear and extended families, and strong feelings of loyalty, reciprocity, and solidarity among members of the same family. Now, what is the definition of the nuclear family within US traditionally has been? It's been male, mom, dad, 2.3 kids. I don't know where they got the 2.3 from, but it's 2.3, and a dog or a cat, depending on who you are, right? Um, that definition has changed a little bit. Now you can have two moms or two dads, right? Or folks who don't identify that way and still be the family. For many people within the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx community, um, our definition of family is way more expanded than the traditional family here. And I bring this to you because you are serving, or you want to be serving people that come from this community, and we better understand what this looks like, right? So in my family, we have comadres and compadres, which is our godparents and godfathers and godmothers, right? We have friends who we consider family. Not everyone needs to be blood relative. In my family, my cousins are not just cousins; they're primo, hermano, or prima, hermana. So they're more akin to brother and sister than just being cousins, right? Um, there are folks who are within the family unit that we have decided to bring in that family unit that are very important for us to understand, right? And when we think about substance disorders, mental health, and any healing practices, they'll be grounded within the family culture, right? For most people. Now, think about people who have migrated into the US and their family they left behind. There's this sort of construction and reconstruction of family and what that looks like for them, right? Um, but this value of familia is very strong within our communities, and we need to take it into account, right? Um, Isabella Leon in the chat says, I am Sanchez, Garcia, Rodriguez, etc. An attitude, right? I am Hernandez Bonilla Sanchez, right? Because we recognize our father's last name, our mother's last name, and other last names. And so it's really powerful for us in terms of how we identify and who's involved in these things. Thank you for putting those things into the chat. I'll read as many as I can, but I can't read them all. But thank you for doing that. Let me give you the next one, respeto or respect. This implies a mutual and reciprocal deference and dictates appropriate differential behavior towards others based on age, sex, social position, economic status, and authority. I'm not asking you to agree with these. I'm asking you to understand what they are, right? Older adults expect respect from those that are younger, men from women, adults from children, teachers from students, employers from employees. So there's a hierarchy that's happening within these communities and within families. Do all follow these hierarchies? No, but it is present amongst many, and it behooves us to understand what these practices are, because if not, we will make mistakes when engaging with people. And again, you don't have to agree with what this looks like, or how this functions, but we need to understand what's happening with people on the ground. And respeto is not something that is given right away. Respeto is something that is earned. So respect is something that is earned in any society, in any community, right? But when people come and see me, I have a doctorate degree and a whole bunch of other initials after my name that you saw earlier, right? And I'm talking with them. I shouldn't confuse people doing this, smiling and shaking their head up and down, with thinking that they're going to do what I'm recommending that they do. They are just showing respect for my position and for my authority within that space. And a lot of people lose sight of that. They think, particularly counselors and social workers that are working with people, and they see people from week to week or month to month, they're making recommendations, and people are going, sí, señor, y qué bien, and all of that good stuff, and the gestures, and you're like, I'm getting through, and this is going to happen. And then they come next week, and what happened with the stuff that we talked about? What did we talk about? And you're going like, wait a minute, but they agreed. No, they didn't agree. Not necessarily. Many people were just being respectful to your title and to the position, right? So, have that in mind by way of respeto and what it looks like by way of reciprocity and deference to the same, right? The next one is personal relationships or personalismo, right? Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latina participants expect behavioral health providers to be warm, friendly, and personal, and to take active interest in the patient's life, in their lives, right? How many of you are working with Hispanic, Latino, Latina people, and they ask you personal questions, right? Think about the personal questions that people ask, right? Do you have any kids? Where are you from? Huh? Where do you live? Do you like to dance? I like your hair. Where do you get your hair done? Whole bunch of different things, right? And in the Western world way of doing work in behavioral health and substance use and counseling and psychology and in medicine, we immediately are taught, oh, those are the boundaries. They're going to cross boundaries. These people cross boundaries. They're unprofessional. They don't know what they're talking about. You don't share anything personal. Listen to all of that, right? Now, my work requires that I ask questions, that I do assessments. How many bags of heroin did you do? What's your mental health condition? If you did heroin or cocaine, how did you use it? Did you inject it? Did you smoke it? Did you what is it? Did you use pills? Right? Oh, are you a sex worker? Do you have sex? Do you exchange sex for money? Was it anal sex? Was it oral sex? Was it what type of sex was it? Was it with a condom, without a condom? Right? We ask all of these very personal questions about people when they're at their most vulnerable. And along comes this person and says, so Jessica, do you have any kids? This is not about me. This is about you. Keep the focus on yourself. You see how we can destroy a relationship by shutting people down with that response. Now, I will say this. There's a continuum here. There's a continuum here by way of responses. Someone says to me, um, so on one end of the continuum is the people who say, this is not about me, this is about you, keep the focus on yourself. Right? That's the response to you have any kids. On the other end of the continuum is someone who says, I have two kids, Jose and Maria. They're 5 and 8 years old. They go to the Milton Bradley School. They drive me crazy. Their social security numbers are X, Y, and Z. When I get home, I have to deal with their homework and blah, blah, blah. They go on and on and on. Have you met those people? Those people give way too much information and they work within our field. And then there's the other extreme that people say, this is not about me. This is about you. Keep the focus on yourself. And it's a continuum with those two extremes. I always think that the extremes are dangerous. However, when I ask you, someone asks you a personal question, where do you fall on the continuum? Where do you fall on the continuum, right? And so some of you have already thought, well, I fall right in the middle because you think that that's the safe place. And I would disagree. I don't sit in the middle. I say it depends on who's asking, who they are, what the context is, what the issues that they're dealing with before I answer a personal question and how much I share. So I'm working with a female, a Latina. Two kids have been taken away from the system. And here we are in a counseling session. And I'm asking her about her kids, and she tells me all of that. And then she turns to me and says, do you have any kids? Of course, I'm going to answer truthfully if I do have kids. I'm not going to tell them their name. I'm not going to tell her their names, social security numbers, and where they go to school. And I'm not going to overshare, but I'm going to share something that's going to create connection. Give you a different scenario. I'm working with a sex offender, and his sex offense was with minors. He asked me, "Do you have any kids on it?" I'm not going to say this is not about me. This is about you. Keep the focus on yourself, because that too is inappropriate even for that person who's asking. Because people ask us questions for a reason, and so I want to know the reason why. Right? So I might not share all of the information, but I'll share some and I'll ask an open ended question. I use motivational interviewing to ask a question. That's personalismo in practice, you see? when you arrive at a party, I'm sure that most of you do this, right? There's this impersonal chit chat that happens, right? How are you? And look at the weather and this, that. How's your family? And how's it? That's personalismo. We do that. Build that into your sessions with Hispanic, Latino, Latin people, because when you do that, you are acknowledging, validating a cultural element that is important to them, and you're validating them. And to what Helen just put in the chat, connection is key. Our work is about relationships. All of it is about relationships, 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 relationships. Honestly, thank you for putting in the chat. Depends on the client and the situation. It depends, it depends, it depends, it depends, it depends, right? Um, but I would never go to those two extremes. Um, and if I have to, they have to be, there have to be some extreme circumstances that pushes me into those areas. Yet within the counseling field, within social work, we're still taught this in schools across the country. So this is an important cultural element for us to take into account. Here we come back to this piece on trust or confianza, right? Building trust has been described as the earliest developmental task and the foundation on which all others are built. Again, trust is not a given. You need to earn trust. We need to earn trust, just as like the people in front of us need to earn our trust. Establishing trust is broadly accepted as fundamental to the development of a therapeutic relationship. And even if you're not a therapist or clinician, and you focus on prevention, trust is extremely important. And here I want to say that is extremely important for us to understand that where you work, you're receiving government funding to do the work that you do. And you might say, well, I'm not a government agency, but we are by extension. And Hispanic, Latino, Latin people, as well as Native people and Black and African American people, have healthy fears of government institutions and the people who work within them. Emphasis on healthy fears. Tuskegee, regarding infecting Black men with syphilis and following them around until they died, is a true thing, and it's in our consciousness over time, even if we weren't alive or we didn't experience that. The distribution of blankets with smallpox to Native American people is a real thing. The forced sterilization of Latina women and Black women in society, perpetuated by government institutions here and in other countries, is a real thing. So when you remember COVID, right? Remember COVID? We were blamed immediately because that's what we like to do, our healthcare system. Oh, they are resisting vaccination. They're vaccine hesitant, we were deemed. Us, us, we working on the ground said, wait a minute, I understand why people don't trust that the government is coming in and saying, get vaccines. I understand that. So I'm not going to blame them. I'm going to develop trust. I'm going to share information and resources, and I'm going to allow them to make their own decision, as opposed to imposing my view on people. So trust and confianza goes in many, many different ways, right? As in forced sterilization of Native American women. Jody, thank you for that. Talked about sterilization, right? So this is right a reality that we need to deal with. And again, some of us might be saying, well, I don't work for the government. We are government organizations by extension, and people view us that way. And you can be a person of color and people don't trust you either, don't trust me either, right? Because I work within that institution. It is about how I come across, how I relate to people, how I humanize people, how I treat people with decency and respect, right? Those things become extremely important. Um, Sharon, as social workers, we cannot connect through trauma as we really do not know what each other go through. 100%. This is the exercise that I do with people when I'm in a classroom. I ask for two volunteers. I walk those two volunteers to a door, and I ask them both to walk through the same door at the same time. And then I invite them back into the room. And I ask one person always, What did you experience walking through the door? And one person says, well, you know what? The door was open. It was cooler on the other side. The walls were painted green and, that sort of thing. Then the other one says, as I was walking through the door, I was reminded that I need to leave here quickly. I'm going to pick up my kids and I need to go by the pharmacy and I need to go this. And now they went through the same door at the same time. Did they experience the same thing? It's no. Same is true to what Sharon is talking about in the chat, right? Same is true that we don't always experience things in the same way. And that's why I'm very careful not to say to people, I'm Latino like you, and I've experienced everything that you have experienced. No, no, no. If I'm looking for connection, I should say, here's who I am. Tell me about who you are. And I'm going to validate who you are. And then we're going to enter into some conversation about that, but never, right, go into that. And here I learned the hard way. A young person that I was working with early on in my career, I said, "Oh, we're the same. I'm Latino, you're Puerto Rican, I'm Puerto Rican. We've been through the same stuff, that sort of thing." And then a few sessions after, he had developed some trust with me, and this is what he said to me: "Can I say something to you?" This is when I first earned my degree. He says, "You know what I thought when you told me that we're the same, that you're full of shit, honey." And I go like, "Tell me more." I was taken aback, right? Because someone tells you you're full of shit. I'm like, "Tell me more about what you mean by that." And he says, "Well, you have a doctorate degree, you have a house, you have a car, you have a job, man, and you have all these things going for you, right? And your familia, they love you and all of that. And we've been talking about all of that. I wish I only had 10% of what you have." And that to me was like, oh wow. Oh, wow. Right? So there's some things that we can relate to one another, but that we are the same, that we've been through the same things, no. And the 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 main reason why he felt comfortable telling me what he told me, speaking truth to power, because I had more power than him at the time, is because of trust and confianza, and it's because of personalismo, and it's because of the way that I infuse the cultural elements into that. And the reason why I know that is because he told me, right? He told me all of those things, right? And I've made a whole bunch of other mistakes. So when I talk about these things, just know that I've made a ton of mistakes. I look to rectify mistakes and not committing them again, right? Spirituality or espiritualidad. Providers often work within structures of mainstream medicine, you know, Western medicine very specifically, which provides separate physical and mental health care. But we separate into silos, right? We're going to send you over here for mental health care. We're going to send you over here for health care. Listen what the literature says about this. Hispanic, Latino, Latinx culture, on the other hand, tends to view health from a holistic point of view. This view implies a continuum of mind, body, spirit, familia, and community. It's holistic. Spirituality is strong within Hispanic, Latino, Latinx participants and families, and combining faith with science is not uncommon. For many, faith is a key component of recovery. Know this. The American Medical Association, it has recognized these cultural elements and is incorporating them into their training of medical providers. As a matter of fact, yesterday I did a session with 25 doctors in training out of UMass, the University of Massachusetts School of Medicine. And you know what they said to me? They said to me, "This is the first time," and these are folks who are ready to go into emergency departments and clinics and right do the residencies. You know what they said to me? "Oh, this is the first time we're hearing this. What we've been told is boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Don't share anything personal." And here I am talking to them about espiritualidad, familismo, personalismo, all of those things, just like I am doing with you. So I'm asking you to bend and in some cases to break rules if we want to be effective in how we engage with people that come from these communities, from our communities, right? Spirituality and religion, for some of us, are two different things, but for some of us, they're one and the same. And so, I believe in family systems theory and I believe in holistic approaches. This piece on espiritualidad comes hand in hand. Now, if you um, leave your office and go into any Hispanic, Latino, Latinx community that is extensive, and you'll spend some time in the neighborhoods, you will see botanicas, you will see herbalists, you will see people who um, provide these types of services that are non-traditional, but they're there. And many times, here's what I told the doctors and what I'm telling you and what I told other healthcare professionals. When people come to us, we're not their first stop. They probably went to a curandero, to a herbalist, to Chango, to whatever spiritualist. They probably went to their faith healer. They went to their priest, their pastor, before they came to us. And they probably tried a whole bunch of things before they came to, us as professionals working within this space. Espiritualidad in this piece here should help us to think about what that looks like, right? And who said this? I'm gonna pick it up here. I'm just trying to look at the chats and probably going simultaneously. Thank you for that. Very true, right? Very true in terms of where people go to get support. And we're no different from the people in front of us. We go to different places for different people for different things, right? So we're not that different. But I will say this: right now, it's the beginning. Well, December 21st is the first day of winter. But what's the hard and fast rule about wearing white in the U.S.? Nobody wears white after. No, nobody should wear white after Labor Day, right? I break that rule all the time. Uh, but within health and healthcare settings, there's people, Hispanic, Latino, Latin people who walk into those settings wearing white and beads, and some of the providers don't get it because the comments are, "Oh, they're breaking the rule after Labor Day that you don't wear white." What they don't understand is that maybe that attire is connected to spiritual beliefs, right? And I've done a lot of work in HIV/AIDS and federally qualified health centers and around hepatitis C and substance disorders and mental health, and it doesn't fail that during this time of year, because it's a very difficult time of year, right? Right now, what's happening on Thursday for many people, they're celebrating Thanksgiving, those people who celebrate that type of thing, and then Christmas and New Year's and all of that. Well, some people who are struggling, they're not celebrating, they don't have the resources to do any of that. So they're struggling, right? And here we are in celebration and festive mode, and some people are not. We need to be very careful with imposing those values on people. And some people tell us with what they're wearing and their body language that is connected to espiritualidad or spirituality, right? So spend some time on this so that we think about what does this look like um, for us doing the work on the ground, right? And I'm giving you notice what I'm giving you, right? I'm giving you the theoretical piece, right? This is published in the literature, but I'm talking about this is practical, how to use it in practical ways to bridge that gap between theory and practice. We can stay in theory all the time unless we make it real in terms of what happens on a daily basis for people and for us as providers. Then we contribute to the same thing, this huge gap between theory and practice. Now, there's a word, Marianismo. Some of you have probably heard this word. It comes from the word Maria. And the Maria that we're talking about here is the Virgin Mary. Think about what that does, right? The majority of Hispanic, Latino, Latin people identify as being Catholic. Not all of them are, but the majority of them do, according to research. And not everyone is a practicing Catholic at that. But here's the expectation is of self-sacrifice of a mother on behalf of her children is prescribed by cultural convention and reinforced through family, social networks, religion, public imagery, in mass media, and on and on and on and on. This concept is known in the literature as Marianismo. I saw my mom exhibit this. I didn't notice it at the time, but after being in this field, and I've seen my sisters and friends exhibit these things, right? My mom would cook and she would eat last. And sometimes she wouldn't eat at all. Right? This is after a hard stay work. Taking care of husbands or boyfriends and leaving themselves for last, right? This is prescribed within the culture. Females in the Latino community, in the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx community, if you don't have a kid by the time you're 30, there's something wrong with you. And the family will let you know when you're having kids, when you're having kids, when you're getting grandkids, when you're blah, 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 blah. And it goes on and on and on and on. A lot of pressure, even on professional women who feel this pressure. Just know that it's there, and know that when you're doing counseling with people, in many instances we're saying, oh, there's abuse, you should leave. And was like, really, this contradicts what the culture is saying. And I'm not saying that people should not leave abusive relationships. I'm saying is we should think about what we're asking people to do and the challenge of that on a daily basis for women very specifically in society, right? And how is this taught? It's taught from generation to generation to generation to generation. And by the way, I have exhibited this in folks who are non-Latino women, right? And we've exhibited this um, all over the place, right? And so know that this is happening in counseling. Know that this is in the room, even if people are not saying it. Just know that it's in the room, right? So if females from within these communities can exhibit Marianismo, what about men? Machismo. And if I was to ask you what's the English language word for machismo, some of you right away translate in your head and you said macho. Well, macho is a Spanish word, it's not an English word. And the translation in English is male chauvinism. And by the way, male chauvinism is alive and well throughout the US, throughout many cultures, but we're talking here about the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx community, right? And if you don't believe that, just look at the US Congress and you'll see machismo all over the place, right? In terms of who's there, the level of power that they wield and how they wield that power. Significantly influences behaviors and attitudes of adolescent males during the time of identity formation. Me, as a young boy, playing outside, and that was the preference. You go outside, your sisters can't go outside, but you go outside, right? You come in the house crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Boys don't cry. You don't show emotion. How does that translate into me getting help for a substance use disorder for being in prison? Like, no, I don't share feelings. I don't talk. I don't talk about my feelings. I don't cry in public. I don't do any of that stuff. That's how that translates in counseling sessions. Or I might not want to cry in front of a female or in front of a male, right? Depending on what my experience is. Now, not everything about machismo is bad. It includes dignity in personal conduct, respect for others, and to be a provider of the family. So not everything about this stuff is a bad thing, right? But we must understand that these cultural elements, they make their way into the spaces and places in which we work because they are embedded within the culture and they're taught within the culture, right? So think about these things. I thought that I had one more slide here that I didn't include, but I'll just talk about it now briefly. And let me take a look at time here because time is an issue. Um, we still have enough time to go to the rest of the slides that I have. But in terms of language, how many of you think that I have an accent? Raise your hand. I have an accent. It's not a trick question, or maybe it is. I don't know. But do you think I have an accent? Thumbs up, maybe. Yeah. So all of you who said, yeah, that I have an accent, I don't have an accent, you have an accent. I don't have an accent, you have an accent. The thing is that you don't hear your accent, you hear mine. What happens when we hear other people's accents is we talk louder and slower. Well, guess what? I'm neither deaf nor dumb. I can understand and I can follow you. The thing is that the accent does something to you about me. Now, I'm not throwing stones. I've done that to people. I've talked slower and louder. Given everything that I know, why would I do that? Because of implicit bias, because of judgment, everything that I talked about earlier. Now, it's important for us to understand that, you know, most Latinos who identify with speaking Spanish, but that's not the only languages that we speak. There are many people from Latin America who speak indigenous languages. And there are many people from Latin America to the tune of 200 million in one country alone, Brazil, who speaks Portuguese or a form of Portuguese. And the other thing I want to bring into the room quickly is the fact that one word can make or break a conversation. Right? I am from the Caribbean. In the 1980s in Massachusetts, we were dealing with HIV/AIDS and people dying. The Massachusetts Department of Public Health developed a campaign that said, AIDS, you don't have to get it. And on the side of that campaign was a big old condom. It was a prevention campaign, right? If you use a condom, you won't get infected with HIV, blah, 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 blah. And so someone said, we need to translate that to Spanish. The Spanish translation went like this: El SIDA no lo tienes que coger. Now, I am from the Caribbean. For me, coger means to get, to get. For many people in parts of North America, which includes Mexico and down into South America, coger has a sexual connotation with having sex. Just one word. For me means to get. Other people means to have sex. Imagine what we do with not understanding that words have meaning and significance. I just got back from Mississippi in the US in the South. I live in the North. It takes me about a day and a half to get to know how people are speaking English there and to get comfortable with it. This is true for any language, for German, for French, for English, for Spanish, for Portuguese, for whatever the language is. Words have different meanings depending on geographical location, neighborhood, community, families, and those sorts of things, right? So when you think about language, think about it as being dynamic in that way, and it's very nuanced. You know how many languages are spoken in New York City alone, not New York State? 800. 800 languages. How many languages are spoken all over the world? Over 5,000. The research says this, right? Now, some of you might be saying, those are not languages. Some of those are dialects. And just shut up. A language is a language is a language. If it's a dialect, what difference does it make to the people who are speaking them? It's their language, right? And so, yeah, Gabby says over 6,000 recognized in the linguistic community. There you have it, right? This whole thing about dialects is just a Western world way of categorizing things. For the people who speak that language, it is their language. We need to validate it. At any rate, I went off on a little rant about language, but when we're talking about the Hispanic, Latino, Latin population, just know that many of us also, for many, their first language is English, right? Or Spanish or a combination, and people do code switching from one language to the next. I mean, indigenous languages in Portuguese and a whole bunch of other stuff. So have that in mind as we move forward. Thank you for everything you're putting into the chat. You actually I like this. Thank you for contributing to my learning as well. I always love to do these things because of those reasons. I get to learn from you as well. So our approach should not be grounded in cultural competency. Cultural competency is a fallacy, is a lie, and is a thing of the past. Competency implies that I know everything there is to know about culture. And you know what I've learned in the almost 3 years of working in this field? That I am culturally incompetent, that there's no way that I can understand everything there is to know about my own culture, never mind about everybody else's. So the shift is towards cultural humility. Cultural humility, what does it imply? It incorporates a lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique, to redressing the power imbalances in the patient-physician dynamic, and to developing mutually beneficial and non-paternalistic clinical and advocacy partnerships with communities on behalf of individuals and the defined population. That was a mouthful, but let me break some stuff down here rather quickly. Lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique. Remember that piece on biases and judgments? Have you ever done a cultural self-assessment? Well, here's where I'm going to recommend that you do one. The National Center on Cultural Competency out of Georgetown University has a number of them. They take about 45 minutes to do. How else are we going to get better unless we look inward? I can't rely on the evaluations that are going to be done about this training to figure out what are the areas that I need to improve. I'll read the evaluations; they're going to be helpful for me, but I need to do a deeper dive into who I am and what I bring. There's another one by Harvard. If you Google Harvard implicit bias, really good tool, very well researched. All of them are. You do it online. It teaches you what you do well, what you don't do so well, And it pushes us to think about how do we go about getting what we need to get better. That's a lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique. A couple of things about that. I do one self-assessment at least once a year. If you do it, don't keep it to yourself. Select a mentor or supervisor, someone that you trust, share the results with that other person. They make us, they help us to make sense of what's happening, right? Redressing power imbalances. Always like this. I have more power than the people who are in front of me. I gave you that example about the young man, right? That I was working with. Mutually beneficial, non-paternalistic. We should be done with telling people what to do, how to do it, when to do it, what doesn't work, blaming them. I don't save anybody's life. I hear a lot of people in our field, oh, I save people's lives. I save people's lives. That's why I got into this. I save people's lives. Time out, man. That is really paternalistic. Here's what I do. I walk side by side people. I share information, resources. I validate their experiences. I share information, resources. I validate their experiences. I share information, resources. I'm a cheerleader. People take on their own issues. They begin to resolve them. They save their own lives. This is not about being paternalistic. It's about empowerment. And the way that I empower people is I get out of the way as opposed to I save lives. I get where that comes from, and I'd saved a life or two. When I administer Narcan on someone who was dying, that's different, right? I'm talking about a process of a journey, a process of wellness, getting better and recovery with this piece on cultural humility and our approach, right? It's more it's more than just going around and saying, well, I went to a 3-hour training on cultural competency. Now I'm culturally competent. Really? It's more about an approach to the work, which includes looking at ourselves. Thank you for everything that's being put in the chat, by the way. So we need to be strength based, is what I'm talking about. It's what we're talking about. Listen, here's a gift that was given to me that doesn't cost anything to give to anyone else. I believe in people more than what they believe in themselves at a certain point in time. So I went from prison to treatment, not because I wanted treatment, but because I wanted to get out of prison. And I went to an all Latino male program in Boston. And when I got there, you know what they did to me? They humanized me. They treated me with decency and respect. They understood that I just wanted to get out of jail. They didn't beat me over the head with that. They said, you deserve to be loved. You deserve wellness. You deserve to get better at whatever it is that you want to do. And we believe in you and we're going to be here for you. And you know what that did to me? It scared the shit out of me because I come from jail. I come from the street. I come from a culture that when someone hugs you is because they want something out of you. When someone does something good for you is because they want something from you. And so when they wanted to hug me, I said, nope, no hugs, fist bumps and handshakes, and that's it. Oh, go to a group and talk about your feelings. I'm not going to talk about my feelings. What are you? And then when I went to the group and the men were talking about their feelings and they were crying, for me, they were all weak. But still, they humanized me. They treated me with decency and respect. They walked side by side me and they taught me that I had the ability to get better. And I will never forget my counselor who said, I've noticed that you don't cry. And I said, yeah, I have nothing to cry about. He says, whenever you're ready, cry in the shower. And I looked at him like, what is he talking about? But it got to a point where one time I entered the shower and it all came down. Him humanizing me and not beating me over the head. That's him believing in me more than what I believed in myself. And at some point, I came back to him and I said, I cried for the first time, man. And he helped me to process that. And then I cried in group. And then I was able to hug other men in group. And now I cry at commercials. It's the humanizing aspect of what we do. So we should be strength based. If we're looking for broken people, that's what we're going to find. If we're looking for people with the ability to get better, that's what we're going to find. And I choose to not look at people as broken people, as I choose to look at people for their strengths, for their resiliency. Some of those people that we come in contact with, they have survived inhumane systems that we wouldn't last one day in a prison cell, that we wouldn't last one day experiencing homelessness, that we wouldn't last one week being hungry. or being abused or being raped, but there they are in front of us with all of that strength. Do I view them as broken, or do I view them as with the ability to get better and then get to work with developing a relationship based on cultural elements, validating people and all of that? And I know that some people might be saying, you're Pollyanna, and that things don't work that way. Well, they have. For me, they have. Oh, but yeah, some people don't want help. Yeah, and what are you saying? That you're going to quit? Then this is not the job for you. Because I took on a job to help people, not to judge people if they want help or not. Because I have yet to come across a person who doesn't want help at something, whatever that is. Someone told me recently, so what do you mean by that? I said, I'll give you a quick example. I was working, someone says, I want to kill myself, I want to die, I want this, and I want that. And he was like really upset and yelling and all of that, and let him get it all out. And then I said, man, are you hungry? Let's get something to eat. And he said, yeah, man, I'm hungry. What can we get to eat, honey? There we go. Did he want to get better or something? Of course, at eating, at nourishing his body, right? I, for me, that was it. It was like, yeah, that's it. And we say, well, we meet people where they're at. Bullshit. Many times we want people to meet us where we're at, right? So for me, it is thinking about, right, who's in front of us and how do we view them. And then all of this for me requires that I have correct supervision, support, guidance, mentors, people that I can go to and say, you know what, I was working with this person, and they touched every single button, man, and I can't find what they want to get better at. But that doesn't mean that I show that in front of the people that I'm working with, right? I don't do that. So for me, this is not an intellectual exercise. I buried my sister, my aunt, three cousins, and a whole bunch of friends. And I'm sure that many of you have as well, right? Family members and people that you loved and people that you cared for. So we need to get better at what we do, is my bottom line, right? And we do it by being strength based. Um, we need to lead with health equity. And here's the definition of SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, about health equity, right? Behavioral health equity is the right to access quality health care for all populations, regardless of the person's race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, geographical location, and social conditions. And SAMHSA says through prevention and treatment. I disagree with that portion of it. I told them is about prevention, intervention, the multiple pathways of recovery, which include treatment and recovery supports, right? So this is the definition that we're working off. I'm sure that many of you, and I'm going to go through this quickly, as just glance at time, and I want to make sure that I get through a few more slides here. I'm sure that many of you have seen this depiction before. I'm going to ask you to focus on equality. And a question that I have for you, do you think equality is real? It's a rhetorical question, by the way, right? Three people, they're trying to watch the ball game, right? Only two can see over the fence. The smallest person cannot, yet they all have the three boxes. The only people who say yes, equality is real is people with power and privilege. Those are the people who believe if I did it, anybody can do it. I don't believe in that, right? Besides, not everybody starts off in the same place. The people with power and privilege believe that equality is real, right? Now, I take you to reality, far right side. Now, the smallest person, is not digging a hole to get under the fence. Now, that person is in a ditch. And many people are relegated to a ditch before they're born. And for those of us who love to go around telling people, if you work hard enough, you're going to make it out, because if I made it out, you can make it out. Slow down. I know people who work 3 and 4 jobs and they will never make in a month what I can make in an hour. That's not me bragging about how much money I can make. That is me indicting a space that says that hard work alone is going to make it. I believe in hard work, but it's not the only thing that's going to help you to come out of that ditch, right? If it was hard work alone, every single female in Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas who is poor would be a multi-billionaire. If it was hard work alone, because they work really hard. The person in the middle, what did they get? The same tired box to see over the fence. That's it. Only enough to see over the fence. Now the tallest person who didn't need a box to begin with now has 7 boxes. And for the most part, we think about who? We think about the millionaire class, the billionaire class, right? That have all of the wealth or most of the wealth. They don't produce it. And we need to hold them accountable. I believe in that. But you know what? Everybody in this room has boxes. I'm a PhD, I have a house, I have a home, I have a retirement account, I have a refrigerator with stuff in it, I have a car. I have a lot of boxes. The question is, how do I use my power and privilege to help other people? I know that this is why you get up every day, to help other people, right? So now I bring you to the middle. And the boxes have been distributed differently. The smallest person, hands up in the air, can see over the fence. The person in the middle for the first time is looking sideways at the smallest person there. The tallest person doesn't need a box, doesn't have one, fists up in the air. And this is what we call equity in the country. And people celebrate equity. And I disagree that this is equity. This is not equity. It is not. Respectfully, I disagree. If you didn't notice, what the problem is within this depiction is the fence. The fence is the problem. If we think that this is equity, then we have just blamed that small person for being small and they have no control over their height. We have blamed these people for being outside of the fence. And you know what the fence represents? It represents policies and procedures that allow some people to get in and push some people out. If you ask these people where they want to see the ball game from, they'll tell you, I want to see it from the bleachers, not being singled out, not standing on boxes. We need to do two things. We need to continue to chase boxes to allow people some level of access while we tear down the fucking fence. We need to do that. That is our responsibility to do that. Structural determinants of health. Structural determinants of health. That's where we need to live. That's where we need to work to help people come up from under that. Quick exercise around critical thinking. Some of you, I would venture to say, you don't even see the fence. Hopefully, now you do. We need to follow the money. There's a lot of money coming into emergency departments, criminal justice settings, and community based settings from the federal government to deal with mental health and substance use disorders. The majority of the money, however, is not going to community based organizations that have most of the trust. They're going into criminal justice settings and emergency departments and federally qualified health centers. And I'm not saying that these places should not have money to do the work, but I'm drawing attention to an equity issue here. And on top of that, the pendulum has swung in the 70s, 80s, part of the 90s, and early 2000s. The gold standard was abstinence in terms of substance use. You need abstinence. Everybody needs abstinence, and you need to be drug free completely before we agree that you are in recovery. Now we have a single focus solution, a different one, and it's not abstinence because the pendulum has swung. You see? What is the single focus solution? Medication. Now everybody needs medication. Jessica needs medication. Casey needs medication. Haley needs medication. Carmen needs medication. Hanel needs medication. Everybody needs medication. I'm not against medication. I run a program that provides medication assisted treatment for people. So it's not that I'm against it. But the issue is that I have read the research. And the research says, and all the credible evidence says, that there's infinite pathways of recovery and getting better. It's not just treatment and it's not just medication. You see? Quickly, I'm going to go through some things here. 12-step, well, gratitude, do those things work? Of course they do. Are they for everybody? No. Storytelling, natural recovery, exercise in recovery, faith in recovery, do those things work? Are they for everybody? No. Arts in recovery, smart recovery, refuge recovery, holistic in recovery, do those things work? Are they for everybody? No. Rational recovery, evidence-based in recovery, sound healing and recovery, celebrate recovery, medication-assisted treatment and recovery. Of course they work. Are they for everybody? No. And then harm reduction and recovery. Does harm reduction work? Yes, it does. Is it for everybody? If your brain told you no, I disagree with you. That's the only pathway of recovery that I disagree because um, because there's evidence about this. Harm reduction is a set of practical strategies and ideas aimed at reducing the negative consequences associated with drug use. Harm reduction is also a movement for social justice built on belief in and respect for the rights of people who use drugs. In this room, fingers up, hands up if you practice harm reduction. If you didn't, if you didn't raise your hand or your finger, some people are, but not everybody. I'm going to tell you this. This morning when I woke up, I brushed my teeth. I got into my car, I put my seatbelt on. I look both ways before I cross the street. I don't hang out with people who use drugs or sell drugs. And so I practice harm reduction on a daily basis. Yet we get all bent out of shape. We say, oh no, harm reduction just condones drug use. Nothing could be further from the truth. Why? Because dead people don't recover. And because change is not an event, it is a process. And because there is such a thing as stages of change proposed by Di Clemente and Prochaska: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And I am responsible for understanding what stage people are in. And if people are in pre-contemplation, they don't want to use, I want them to use safer. I want them to use in a way that's not going to enable them to get HIV or hepatitis C or any other an opiate overdose. So I need to embrace harm reduction. What is the most controversial aspect of harm reduction right now in our field, in our society? It is what's being called safe consumption sites. Other people call them overdose prevention centers. How many of you have ever been into a safe consumption site or a safe consumption site? Let me just leave it that way. How many of you have ever been? If you don't raise your hand, let me ask a question in a different way. How many of you have ever been into a bar? How many of you have ever been into a smoke shop? How many of you have ever been into a tattoo parlor? Safe consumption sites. You see our stigma, you see our bias, you see, right? We have safe consumption sites for some things, but not for others. We need to do away with our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors around certain things about how people get better, right? We have 3 minutes, people. We need not just do criminal justice reform, we need to do restorative justice with the people who are coming out of those spaces and places. This is my final slide. And I want you to pay close attention to the imagery here and the words. We work really hard to pull some people out of the rivers of substance use disorders, mental health challenges, poverty, homelessness, incarceration, etc. Notice they have a boat, so white people in the boat. These are pictures from Katrina, Hurricane Katrina. Remember that? Here's another image. Historically, racialized people have had no choice but to do for ourselves, and we have. There is no boat. Look at how people are fending for themselves to get out of those rivers, right? And then finally, there are those who we are intentionally leaving behind because they're profits to be extracted from trauma, poverty, and unhealthy people. I want us to take a page out of the words of Desmond Tutu, who said, we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in to begin with. This is my call for us to do prevention. This is our call for us to work on the structural determinants of health. That is our call. So when you think about how people get better, when you think about the cultural elements that I shared with you, when you think about all of this work, continue to do what you're doing. And when you're tired of that, do some more of it. Gain support from supervisors, from other folks in your life. Take care of yourself. Demand that your organization does the right thing by you and not just send you to do self-care. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for everything that you do, for your participation in today's webinar, and for sharing with me your thoughts. And I hope that our paths will cross again. Muchas gracias.
And with that, I just want to say on behalf of CalTrin, on behalf of all of our participants, Dr. Hernandez, we just want to say thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, and for all the, as you can see in the chat, a lot of accolades, I'm sure, will be flooding through. We cannot thank you enough. To the participants, we want to thank you as well for your participation, for taking the time in your day to be here and fully commit to being here in this discussion. We also want to remind you that at the end of the survey that we're going to be dropping into the chat a couple of times, that survey will have at the end access to a certificate of attendance. You'll also have information about requesting CEUs for today's session. And with that, Dr. Hernandez, we hope to see you again. And thank you all to participants, first timers, and returned audience members. We look forward to seeing you at the next CalTrin session. Thank you all so much and have a great rest of your day.